Have you ever felt like a small reed swaying in the mighty winds of fate, destined for a path far grander than your humble beginnings? Have you ever sensed a whisper in your spirit, a calling that defied all logic and expectation, even when the world around you saw only the ordinary? If so, then your soul resonates with the ancient echoes of a young man whose journey began not in the gilded halls of power, but amidst the dusty plains and rugged hills of a land steeped in prophecy and promise. This is the saga of David, a name that would forever be etched into the very fabric of history, a shepherd boy whose heart beat in rhythm with the divine, chosen to become the most revered monarch of Israel, a true man after the Creator's own heart. But let no illusion of effortless triumph cloud your perception. David's path was not paved with smooth stones and endless sunshine. It was a winding trail, fraught with treacherous valleys and towering peaks, marked by moments of breathtaking victory and the crushing weight of profound failure. It is precisely this intricate tapestry of human experience, woven with threads of both glory and despair, that renders his story so profoundly compelling, so eternally relevant to the struggles and triumphs we face in our own lives today. His narrative is a testament to the enduring power of faith, the resilience of the human spirit, and the unwavering hand of destiny. Our epic begins not in the bustling metropolis, but in the quiet, sun-drenched village of Bethlehem, a modest settlement nestled on the fringes of the ancient city of Jerusalem. Here, life moved at the gentle pace of the seasons, dictated by the rhythm of the land and the tending of flocks. It is within this unassuming backdrop that we encounter the lineage of Jesse, a man whose existence, though seemingly unremarkable, was about to become the fertile ground from which a monumental shift in the destiny of Israel would blossom. The sacred texts in 1 Samuel chapter 16 unveil the divine decree. The Most High, in his infinite wisdom, dispatched the venerable prophet Samuel to Bethlehem, specifically to the dwelling of Jesse. Samuel carried a burden of immense significance, a mission both clandestine and pivotal to anoint the next sovereign of Israel, a king chosen not by human preference, but by divine selection. Jesse, a patriarch of his clan, was blessed with 8 sons, each a unique thread in the family tapestry. Among them, David was the youngest, often overshadowed, a mere sapling compared to the sturdy oaks of his elder brothers. While his siblings, with their imposing physiques and martial prowess, commanded attention and respect, David's days unfolded in the serene solitude of the open fields, his sole companions the woolly creatures entrusted to his care. This seemingly humble occupation, far from being a trivial pursuit, was in fact the crucible in which the character of the future king was being forged. The vast, untamed wilderness of Bethlehem became his classroom, a silent mentor imparting lessons that no royal court, no grand academy could ever hope to teach. In the face of lurking predators, the cunning lion, the formidable bear, David honed a courage that would one day stand firm against the most terrifying of adversaries. He cultivated a profound sense of compassion, tending to the vulnerable lambs and guiding the weary ewes, a tenderness that would later define his reign as a shepherd of his people. He mastered the art of leadership, steering his flock through verdant pastures and beside tranquil waters, a skill that would prove indispensable in navigating the turbulent currents of national governance. Unbeknownst to him, under the vast, star-studded African sky, he was being meticulously prepared, not merely to guard sheep, but to lead a nation, to shepherd a people chosen by the Almighty. But a storm was brewing, a whisper of change carried on the desert winds. A prophet, guided by an unseen hand, was drawing near, and the quiet life of the young shepherd was about to be irrevocably altered by a secret anointing that would set him on a collision course with destiny. The arrival of Samuel at Jesse's homestead was an event that rippled through the small community. The air crackled with an unspoken anticipation, a sense that something momentous was about to unfold. One by one, Jesse presented his elder sons, each a picture of strength and capability, men who, by all outward appearances, seemed perfectly suited for the mantle of kingship. There was Eliab, tall and commanding, his presence radiating authority. Samuel, gazing upon him, felt a surge of conviction, believing this must surely be the Lord's chosen. Yet a divine voice, clear and unmistakable, resonated within his spirit, gently correcting his human judgment. "Do not look on his appearance or on the height of his stature, because I have rejected him. For the Lord sees not as man sees. Man looks on the outward appearance, but the Lord looks on the heart." This profound truth echoed with each subsequent presentation. Abinadab, Shammah, and the others all passed before the prophet, each possessing qualities that might impress the human eye, yet none bore the invisible mark of divine selection. A sense of bewilderment must have settled upon Samuel. He had been sent with a clear directive, a sacred task, yet the chosen one remained elusive. With a growing sense of urgency, he turned to Jesse, his voice laced with a question that held the key to unlocking the divine mystery. "Are these all your sons?" Jesse, perhaps with a hint of dismissiveness, replied, "There remains yet the youngest, but behold, he is keeping the sheep." It was a common sentiment, a reflection of the societal norms where the youngest, especially one engaged in such a humble profession, was often overlooked, deemed less significant. But Samuel, guided by a wisdom far beyond his own, insisted, "Send and get him, for we will not sit down till he comes here." The prophet's unwavering resolve underscored the gravity of the moment, a testament to the divine imperative that transcended human hierarchy. When David finally arrived, summoned from the solitude of his pastures, he presented a stark contrast to his elder brothers. He was described as ruddy, with beautiful eyes and a handsome appearance, but it was not merely his outward charm that captivated Samuel. There was an inner radiance, a spirit of purity and devotion that shone through. As David stood before him, the divine voice spoke once more, this time with an unmistakable clarity. "Arise, anoint him, for this is he." In that sacred instant, the trajectory of a nation, and indeed the course of human history, was irrevocably altered. The anointing itself, as recorded in 1 Samuel 16:13, was a moment of profound spiritual power. Samuel took the horn, brimming with sacred oil, and poured it upon David's head, a symbolic act performed in the presence of his astonished brothers. At that very moment, the Spirit of the Lord descended upon David with an overwhelming force, imbuing him with a divine presence and empowering him for the monumental tasks that lay ahead. Imagine the scene. A young shepherd, perhaps bewildered and certainly surprised, standing before his family, now marked by the hand of the Almighty as the future king of Israel. His brothers, who had always viewed him as the little one, the keeper of sheep, were now unwitting witnesses to a miracle, a divine intervention that defied all their preconceived notions. Yet the immediate aftermath of this extraordinary event was not a sudden ascent to the throne. David's journey was only just beginning. After the anointing, he returned to the familiar rhythm of the fields. Outwardly, little had changed. He remained a shepherd, diligently tending his flock. But within, a profound transformation had taken root. The Spirit of the Lord, now a constant companion, was meticulously preparing him, shaping his character, and refining his spirit for the immense responsibilities that awaited him. The quiet solitude of the pastures became a sanctuary for reflection, a training ground for leadership, and a school for divine wisdom. But as David continued his humble duties, a shadow was lengthening over the royal court of King Saul, a darkness that would soon draw the anointed shepherd into the very heart of power, setting the stage for an encounter that would forever alter his destiny. From pastures to palace walls, the minstrel's call, while the Spirit of the Lord had descended upon David, bringing with it a profound sense of purpose and empowerment. A starkly different spiritual reality was unfolding within the opulent yet increasingly troubled palace of King Saul. The very same sacred texts in 1 Samuel 16:14-23 paint a somber picture. The Spirit of the Lord, which had once empowered Saul for his kingship, had tragically departed from him. In its place, an oppressive, malevolent spirit, permitted by the divine, began to torment the king, plunging him into fits of melancholic despair, irrational rage, and profound anguish. The once mighty monarch, chosen by God, now found himself a prisoner within the confines of his own tormented mind. Saul's loyal servants, witnessing their king's escalating torment, sought desperately for a remedy. They observed that certain melodies, certain harmonies, possessed a soothing quality, a power to momentarily lift the veil of darkness from their sovereign spirit. It was then that a suggestion arose: to find a skilled musician, a master of the lyre or harp, whose melodies could calm the disturbed king. The idea, born of desperation, would inadvertently become the bridge that connected the humble shepherd to the very heart of the kingdom. It was in this moment of royal need that David's name, carried on the whispers of the court, emerged. One of Saul's attentive servants, perhaps having heard tales from Bethlehem or witnessed David's musical prowess firsthand, spoke of him with an almost poetic reverence. He described David not merely as a talented player of the lyre, but as a young man of remarkable qualities. "Behold, I have seen a son of Jesse the Bethlehemite, who is skillful in playing, a mighty man of valor, a man of war, prudent in speech, and a man of good presence, and the Lord is with him." This comprehensive description, painting David as a multifaceted individual of both artistic grace and martial strength, underscored the divine favor that rested upon him. The most crucial detail, however, was the final affirmation, "and the Lord is with him." This was the true source of his calming influence, the spiritual power that transcended mere musical skill. Thus, the summons was issued. The young shepherd, whose days had been spent in the quiet contemplation of nature and the diligent care of his flock, now found himself abruptly thrust into the glittering yet perilous world of the royal palace. He stood before King Saul, his lyre in hand, ready to offer the solace of his music to a troubled soul. As David played, the haunting melodies, imbued with the spirit that rested upon him, began to work their magic. The oppressive spirit that tormented Saul would recede, and the king would experience moments of blessed relief, a temporary respite from his inner turmoil. This was no mere coincidence. It was the intricate weaving of divine providence. The very musical talent that David had cultivated during the long, solitary hours in the fields under the vast African sky was now positioning him within the inner sanctum of power. He was not just a musician, he was an observer, a learner, absorbing the intricacies of court life, the dynamics of leadership, and the subtle currents of political intrigue. He was being prepared not just for a future role, but for the very essence of kingship itself. Saul, impressed by David's skill and the peace his music brought, took a liking to the young man, eventually appointing him as his armor-bearer. This was a position of close proximity and trust, granting David unparalleled access to the king and the workings of the kingdom. But even as David found favor in the king's eyes, a colossal shadow was beginning to stretch across the land, a challenge so immense that it would demand not just musical skill, but a courage forged in the fires of unwavering faith. A challenge that would truly define David's youth and catapult him onto the stage of national destiny. The transition from the tranquil pastures to the bustling, often treacherous environment of the royal court was a monumental shift for David. He moved from a life of simple routines to one filled with complex protocols, political maneuverings, and the constant presence of a king whose moods swung wildly between affection and dark despair. Yet David navigated this new world with a quiet dignity and an innate wisdom that belied his youth. He learned to observe, to listen, and to understand the subtle currents of power. He saw firsthand the burdens of leadership, the isolation of the throne, and the devastating consequences of a spirit estranged from the divine. His role as armor-bearer was more than just a ceremonial position. It meant being constantly at the king's side, carrying his weapons, attending to his needs, and being privy to his most private moments. This intimate access provided David with an invaluable education in statecraft, military strategy, and the delicate art of governance. He witnessed the strengths and weaknesses of Saul's rule, the loyalty of his commanders, and the aspirations of the people. Every interaction, every observation was a building block in the foundation of his own future leadership. Moreover, David's presence in the court was a constant reminder of the divine hand at work. His music, a conduit for the Spirit of the Lord, brought a temporary peace to Saul, a stark contrast to the king's own inner turmoil. This dynamic subtly highlighted the difference between a king chosen by human preference and one anointed by divine decree. David's humility, his unwavering faith, and his genuine desire to serve, even in the face of Saul's unpredictable nature, set him apart. He was not seeking personal glory or political advancement. He was simply fulfilling the role he had been called to, trusting in the Lord's guidance. The court, with its intrigues and power struggles, could have easily corrupted a lesser man. But David, grounded in his faith and the lessons learned in the solitude of the fields, remained steadfast. He understood that true power came not from earthly position, but from divine favor. He continued to hone his skills, both musical and martial, always ready to serve, always prepared for whatever the Lord might call him to do. But the quiet lessons of the court were about to be overshadowed by a thunderous roar, a challenge that would shake the very foundations of Israel and demand a hero of unparalleled courage. The stage was set, the armies arrayed, and a giant's shadow loomed large, waiting for a champion to emerge from the ranks of the fearful. The giant's shadow and the shepherd's courage. The air was thick with the dust of anticipation, heavy with the scent of fear and the metallic tang of impending battle. The armies of Israel, arrayed on one side of the valley of Elah, faced their ancient and formidable adversaries, the Philistines, entrenched on the opposing ridge. For days, a stalemate had gripped the land, broken only by the terrifying pronouncements of a single colossal figure. This was Goliad, a champion of the Philistines, a name that struck terror into the hearts of even the bravest Israelite warriors. Goliad was not merely a tall man. He was a living monument to brute force, a titan among mortals. Standing at an astonishing height of nearly 3 meters, he towered over every man on the battlefield. His body was encased in a meticulously crafted bronze armor, a formidable shell weighing over 50 kilograms. Each scale a testament to his invincibility. The shaft of his spear was like a weaver's beam, a massive wooden pole, and its iron head alone weighed 600 shekels, a weapon capable of piercing through the strongest shields. For 40 agonizing days, Goliad had emerged from the Philistine ranks, his booming voice echoing across the valley, mocking the armies of the living God, challenging them to send forth a single champion for a duel that would decide the fate of the nations. Yet no one dared to answer his call. The fear he inspired was absolute, paralyzing the entire Israelite army, including their king, Saul. It was into this atmosphere of dread and despair that David, having temporarily returned to Bethlehem to tend his father's sheep, was dispatched. His mission was simple: to bring provisions, roasted grain, loaves of bread, and cheeses to his elder brothers who were serving in Saul's army, and to gather news of their well-being. As he approached the camp, the familiar sounds of war were replaced by the chilling roars of Goliad, his daily taunts echoing through the valley. David witnessed the fear etched on the faces of the Israelite soldiers, their morale shattered, their courage evaporated. A righteous indignation, a fire fueled by his unwavering faith, ignited within David's spirit. "Who is this uncircumcised Philistine?" he demanded, his voice ringing with conviction that he should defy the armies of the living God. His question, born of a pure heart, was met with incredulity and scorn by his elder brother Eliab, who accused him of arrogance and idleness. But David's resolve was unshakable. He had seen the fear, he had heard the blasphemy, and he knew with an absolute certainty that this challenge could not go unanswered. David's courage in the face of this seemingly insurmountable giant was not a sudden, impulsive burst of bravado. It was a courage meticulously forged in the crucible of his solitary life as a shepherd. In the desolate fields of Bethlehem, he had faced the ferocious lion and the powerful bear, not with the sophisticated weaponry of a trained soldier, but with his bare hands and a shepherd's staff, all to protect his beloved flock. He had learned that true strength came not from physical might alone, but from an unshakable trust in the Almighty, the Shepherd of Israel. When questioned about his ability to confront Goliad, David's response was imbued with a quiet yet profound confidence. "The Lord who delivered me from the paw of the lion and from the paw of the bear will deliver me from the hand of this Philistine." His faith was not a mere belief. It was a lived experience, a tested conviction. Armed with nothing but his shepherd's staff, his trusty sling, and 5 smooth stones carefully selected from the bed of a nearby brook, David advanced to face Goliad. The contrast between the two figures could not have been more stark, more dramatic. On one side, a young, unassuming shepherd, his frame slender, his face unlined by battle, representing faith and divine reliance. On the other, a towering, armored warrior, a veteran of countless battles, embodying brute strength and human might. A simple sling against a formidable sword, a handful of stones against a massive spear, unwavering faith against overwhelming fear. As Goliad caught sight of his youthful adversary, a sneer of contempt twisted his massive features. "Am I a dog," he bellowed, his voice laced with derision, "that you come to me with sticks?" He cursed David by his gods, promising to feed his flesh to the birds of the air and the beasts of the field. But David, his spirit ablaze with divine fire, met the giant's scorn with words that would echo through the annals of time. Words that transcended the immediate confrontation and spoke to the eternal struggle between good and evil. "You come to me with a sword and with a spear and with a javelin, but I come to you in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. This day the Lord will deliver you into my hand, and I will strike you down and cut off your head. And I will give the dead bodies of the host of the Philistines this day to the birds of the air and to the wild beasts of the earth, that all the earth may know that there is a God in Israel, and that all this assembly may know that the Lord saves not with sword and spear. For the battle is the Lord's, and he will give you into our hand." With these words, David moved swiftly. He reached into his shepherd's bag, drew forth a single smooth stone, placed it in his sling, and with a powerful, practiced motion, hurled it towards the giant. The stone, guided by an unseen hand, flew with unerring accuracy, striking Goliad squarely on his forehead. The impact was devastating. The colossal warrior, his massive frame suddenly devoid of strength, swayed for a moment, then crashed to the ground, face downward, a thunderous sound that reverberated through the valley. In an instant, the impossible had become reality. The shepherd had defeated the warrior. Faith had triumphed over fear. The Philistines, witnessing the fall of their champion, were seized by panic and fled in disarray. The Israelites, their fear transformed into a surge of triumphant courage, pursued them with renewed vigor. David, standing over the fallen giant, drew Goliath's own massive sword and with a decisive stroke severed his head. The victory was complete, a testament to the power of the Almighty working through the most unlikely of champions. But this monumental triumph, while bringing immediate glory, would also ignite a dangerous spark in the heart of a king, setting David on a path fraught with both adoration and perilous envy. A hero's rise and a king's jealousy. The reverberations of David's victory over Goliath echoed far beyond the valley of Elah, transforming the young shepherd from an obscure figure into a national hero, a beacon of hope for a people long oppressed. His triumph was not merely a military feat, it was a profound spiritual declaration, a testament to the unwavering power of the Most High working through a humble vessel. It proclaimed to all of Israel, and indeed to the surrounding nations, that the Lord's strength was not measured by human might or impressive stature, but by the purity of heart and the depth of faith. While others, including King Saul, had been paralyzed by fear, God had looked beyond outward appearances and chosen a heart aligned with his own. This singular event marked the true genesis of David's meteoric rise. From the quiet anonymity of Bethlehem's pastures, he was catapulted into the dazzling, yet often treacherous spotlight of public adoration. The women of Israel, their hearts overflowing with joy and gratitude, poured out of their cities to celebrate the returning warriors. Their songs, sung with fervent passion and accompanied by timbrels and dances, hailed the triumph. Saul has struck down his thousands and David his tens of thousands. This refrain, intended as a joyous acclamation, inadvertently sowed the seeds of a bitter jealousy in the heart of King Saul. Saul, once the anointed king, now found himself overshadowed by the burgeoning popularity of this young upstart. The song, though celebrating his own victories, attributed a far greater glory to David. "They have ascribed to David tens of thousands," Saul muttered, his voice laced with resentment, "and to me they have ascribed thousands. What more can he have but the kingdom?" From that moment, a dark and corrosive envy took root in Saul's soul, transforming his initial admiration for David into a deep-seated suspicion and ultimately a murderous obsession. He began to eye David with a malevolent gaze, his heart consumed by a fear that this young hero would usurp his throne. Yet amidst the growing darkness of Saul's jealousy, a remarkable bond of friendship blossomed, a covenant of loyalty that would prove to be a lifeline for David in the perilous years to come. Jonathan, Saul's own son and heir apparent, was profoundly moved by David's courage, his faith and his spirit. The sacred narrative in 1 Samuel 18:1 beautifully captures the essence of this extraordinary connection. As soon as he had finished speaking to Saul, the soul of Jonathan was knit to the soul of David, and Jonathan loved him as his own soul. This was no superficial camaraderie, it was a deep spiritual kinship, a bond forged in mutual respect and admiration, transcending the boundaries of social standing and political ambition. The depth of this friendship was powerfully demonstrated through Jonathan's actions. In a symbolic and profoundly significant gesture, Jonathan removed the robe he was wearing, a garment befitting a prince, and bestowed it upon David. He also gave him his tunic, his sword, his bow, and his belt. In the cultural context of that era, this act was far more than a mere exchange of gifts between friends. It was a tacit acknowledgement, a symbolic abdication of his own royal claim in favor of David. Jonathan, the rightful heir, was, in essence, recognizing David's divine destiny, placing loyalty to his friend and to God's will above his own personal ambition. As this profound friendship flourished, David continued to gain favor, not only with Jonathan, but also with the people of Israel and, initially, even with King Saul. The biblical account in 1 Samuel 18:5 notes that whatever mission Saul sent him on, David was successful. So Saul set him over the men of war, and he was acceptable in the sight of all the people and also in the sight of Saul's servants. David demonstrated not only unparalleled courage on the battlefield, but also wisdom, strategic acumen, and a natural ability to lead, qualities that endeared him to both the common soldier and the officers of the court. However, David's escalating success and popularity only served to fuel the raging inferno of Saul's jealousy. The king's dark moods became more frequent, his attempts to harm David more overt. The very next day, after the women's celebratory song, as recorded in 1 Samuel 18:10-11, an evil spirit, permitted by God, once again tormented Saul. As David played his lyre, attempting to soothe the king's troubled spirit, Saul, in a fit of rage, hurled his spear at David, intending to pin him to the wall. David, with divine agility, evaded the deadly projectile, not once, but twice. This incident marked the chilling beginning of a long and harrowing series of attempts by Saul to eliminate David, transforming the once welcome musician into a target of royal wrath. Despite Saul's escalating hostility and his relentless pursuit, David continued to prosper, a testament to the unwavering presence of the Lord in his life. The scriptures affirm in 1 Samuel 18:14-16 that David had success in all his undertakings, for the Lord was with him. And when Saul saw that he had great success, he stood in fearful awe of him. But all Israel and Judah loved David, because he went out and came in before them. Seeing that direct attempts on David's life were thwarted, Saul resorted to more insidious schemes. One such plot involved his own daughter, Michal, who had fallen deeply in love with David. Saul, feigning pleasure at the prospect, offered Michal in marriage to David, but with a treacherous condition. He demanded a dowry of 100 Philistine foreskins, hoping that David would perish in the perilous endeavor. Yet David, empowered by the Lord, not only survived but exceeded the demand, bringing back 200 foreskins. Saul, left with no alternative, was compelled to give Michal to David in marriage. But even the bond of marriage to the king's daughter offered no true sanctuary. Saul's animosity festered, growing ever more virulent, pushing David to the brink of exile and forcing him to rely solely on the divine protection that had guided him since his youth. The stage was set for a desperate flight, a period of wilderness wandering that would test David's faith to its absolute limits, shaping him into the resilient leader he was destined to become. The fugitive's wilderness journey, the royal court, once a place of honor and opportunity for David, had transformed into a cage of peril, its gilded bars now threatening to imprison his very life. Saul's jealousy, a venomous serpent, had coiled itself around his heart, twisting his judgment and driving him to increasingly desperate acts. The sacred narrative in 1 Samuel 19:1 reveals the chilling extent of Saul's obsession. Saul spoke to Jonathan his son and to all his servants that they should kill David. The king's command was unequivocal, a death sentence pronounced upon the man who had saved his nation. Yet in this darkest hour, the unwavering bond of friendship between David and Jonathan proved to be a beacon of hope. Jonathan, risking his own position, his own life, and his own claim to the throne, interceded passionately for David with his father. In a powerful plea recorded in 1 Samuel 19:4-5, Jonathan reasoned with Saul, "Let not the king sin against his servant David, because he has not sinned against you, and because his deeds have been of great service to you. For he took his life in his hand and struck down the Philistine, and the Lord worked a great salvation for all Israel. You saw it and rejoiced. Why then will you sin against innocent blood by killing David without cause?" Temporarily swayed by his son's eloquent arguments and the undeniable truth of David's past service, Saul swore an oath. "As the Lord lives, he shall not be put to death." However, the fragile peace was short-lived. The oppressive spirit that tormented Saul soon returned. plunging him back into his dark despair and reigniting his murderous rage. Once again, as David played his lyre, Saul hurled his spear, attempting to pin him to the wall. David, with divine intervention, managed to escape. But the message was clear. He was no longer safe within the palace walls. The time for flight had come. It was in this moment of extreme peril that Michal, David's wife and Saul's daughter, played a crucial role in his escape. In 1 Samuel 19:11-12, we read of Saul's messengers surrounding David's house, poised to strike at dawn. Michal, with quick thinking and unwavering loyalty, warned David, "If you do not save your life tonight, tomorrow you will be killed." She then lowered him through a window, a desperate act that marked the beginning of David's long and arduous period of exile. The hero of Israel, the beloved of the people, was now a hunted fugitive, forced to wander in his own land, a stark contrast to his former glory. This period of flight and wilderness wandering was a crucible for David, shaping his character and deepening his reliance on the Almighty. He sought refuge in various places, each stop a testament to his precarious existence. His first destination was Ramah, to the prophet Samuel, seeking guidance and solace. From there, he journeyed to Nob, to the priest Ahimelech. Not wanting to reveal the true extent of his desperate situation, David fabricated a story about being on a secret mission for the king. Ahimelech, unaware of the danger, provided David with the consecrated bread meant only for priests and the sword of Goliath, which had been kept as a trophy. This seemingly innocuous act, however, would have tragic repercussions later, as Doeg the Edomite, one of Saul's servants, was present and later reported the incident to Saul, leading to the brutal massacre of Ahimelech and many other priests. David then fled to Gath, the very heartland of the Philistines, the people whose champion he had slain. Here, in a desperate act of self-preservation, he feigned madness, scratching marks on the doors and letting saliva run down his beard, hoping to be dismissed as harmless and insane rather than recognized as the formidable Israelite warrior. This humiliating episode, recorded in 1 Samuel 21, underscores the depths of his desperation. From Gath, he sought refuge in the cave of Adullam, a vast cavern that became a sanctuary for him. It was here that his family and a diverse group of individuals, everyone who was in distress, and everyone who was in debt, and everyone who was bitter in soul, 1 Samuel 22:2, gathered around him. David became their leader, transforming this motley crew of outcasts into a loyal and formidable band of warriors. Meanwhile, Saul's relentless pursuit of David continued, fueled by an irrational hatred that bordered on madness. The king's obsession led him to commit unspeakable acts of cruelty, including the aforementioned massacre of the priests of Nob, a chilling demonstration of how far he had fallen from his divine calling. Yet even amidst this relentless persecution, David demonstrated a profound respect for the divine order. He had two distinct opportunities to end Saul's life, to seize the throne that had been promised to him, but he steadfastly refused. The first instance occurred in the desolate wilderness of En-Gedi. Saul, pursuing David, entered a cave to relieve himself, completely unaware that David and his men were hidden deep within its recesses. David's men urged him, "This is the day of which the Lord said to you, 'Behold, I will give your enemy into your hand, and you shall do to him as it shall seem good to you.'" 1 Samuel 24:4. David crept forward stealthily and cut off a corner of Saul's robe. Immediately afterward, his conscience smote him. He declared to his men, "The Lord forbid that I should do this thing to my Lord, the Lord's anointed, to put out my hand against him, seeing he is the Lord's anointed." 1 Samuel 24:6. He understood that Saul, despite his wickedness, was still God's chosen king, and it was not his place to hasten God's plan through violence. The second opportunity arose when David, accompanied by Abishai, infiltrated Saul's camp under the cover of night. They found Saul sleeping soundly, his spear stuck in the ground beside his head. Abishai, eager to end their suffering, whispered to David, "God has given your enemy into your hand this day. Now, therefore, let me pin him to the earth with one stroke of the spear. I will not strike him twice." 1 Samuel 26:8. But David once again refused. "Do not destroy him," David commanded, "for who can put out his hand against the Lord's anointed and be guiltless? As the Lord lives, the Lord will strike him, or his day will come to die, or he will go down into battle and perish. The Lord forbid that I should put out my hand against the Lord's anointed." 1 Samuel 26:9-11. These acts of profound restraint, performed under immense pressure and personal danger, underscore David's deep reverence for the authority established by God, even when that authority was being wielded unjustly against him. He recognized that the timing and method of his ascent to the throne were in God's hands, not his own. This period of flight, though filled with hardship, was a crucial time of spiritual and leadership formation for David. Away from the comforts of the palace and the glory of military victories, he learned to trust in God in the most extreme circumstances. He developed unparalleled leadership skills, transforming a band of desperate men into a disciplined and loyal fighting force. These experiences, forged in the crucible of adversity, were meticulously preparing him for the monumental role he would eventually assume as king of Israel. But the relentless pursuit of Saul, though repeatedly thwarted by David's faith and God's protection, could not last forever. A dramatic turn of events was on the horizon, a final tragic confrontation that would bring an end to Saul's troubled reign and open the way for David to finally step into his divine destiny, yet not without a profound sense of sorrow and lament. The crown awaits, Saul's fall and David's ascent, the long, arduous years of David's exile, marked by relentless pursuit and constant peril, finally drew to a close, not through David's own hand, but through a tragic turn of events orchestrated by the unseen hand of destiny. The relentless pursuit of Saul, fueled by his consuming jealousy and tormented spirit, would only cease with the king's own demise. The Philistines, Israel's perennial adversaries, once again mustered their forces for a decisive battle, arraying themselves against the armies of Israel on the slopes of Mount Gilboa. The conflict was fierce, and the tide of war turned decisively against Israel. Saul, witnessing the utter rout of his forces and the death of his 3 sons, including the beloved Jonathan, found himself in a desperate and untenable situation. Wounded by archers and facing imminent capture and humiliation at the hands of the uncircumcised Philistines, he made a tragic choice. He pleaded with his armor-bearer to kill him, but the young man, overcome with fear and reverence for his king, refused. In a final desperate act, Saul fell upon his own sword, choosing death over the ignominy of capture. When the news of Saul's and Jonathan's death reached David, it was delivered by a young Amalekite who, hoping for a reward, claimed to have dealt the final blow to the wounded king. However, his expectation of recompense was met not with celebration, but with a profound and unexpected reaction from David. In 2 Samuel 1:14-16, David's response is chillingly clear. "How is it that you were not afraid to put out your hand to destroy the Lord's anointed?" David then commanded one of his young men, "Turn aside and strike him down." The Amalekite was executed, not for bringing bad news, but for daring to lay a hand on the Lord's anointed, even in his final moments. This act underscored David's unwavering respect for the divine institution of kingship, a principle he had upheld throughout his years of persecution. It also served as a stark warning to all. Any attempt to curry favor with David through violence against his enemies, especially the Lord's anointed, would be met with severe judgment. David's reaction to the news was not one of triumphant joy, but of deep lamentation. He tore his clothes, wept, and fasted until evening, mourning for Saul and Jonathan and for the fallen army of Israel. He then composed a poignant and beautiful lament known as the Song of the Bow, a powerful elegy that honored both Saul and Jonathan. In 2 Samuel 1:19-23, David's words resonate with profound sorrow. Your glory, O Israel, is slain on your high places. How the mighty have fallen. Tell it not in Gath. Publish it not in the streets of Ashkelon, lest the daughters of the Philistines rejoice. Saul and Jonathan, beloved and lovely. In life and in death they were not divided. They were swifter than eagles. They were stronger than lions. This lament, particularly for Jonathan, highlighted the extraordinary depth of their friendship, a bond that transcended the bitter feud between their families. It demonstrated David's noble character, his capacity to mourn even for his persecutor, and his unwavering loyalty to the memory of his beloved friend. After a period of profound mourning, David, ever reliant on divine guidance, sought the Lord's counsel for his next step. In 2 Samuel 2:1 we read, "After this David inquired of the Lord, 'Shall I go up into any of the cities of Judah?' And the Lord said to him, 'Go up.' He said, 'To which?' And he said, 'To Hebron.'" This consistent consultation with God before every major decision would become a hallmark of David's reign, a stark contrast to Saul's often impulsive and self-reliant actions. Upon arriving in Hebron, David was welcomed by the men of Judah, who then anointed him king over the tribe of Judah. This was the first tangible step in the fulfillment of the divine promise made to him years earlier by Samuel. However, David's ascent to the throne of all Israel would not be immediate or without further conflict. Abner, the commander of Saul's army, had taken Saul's son Ishbosheth and proclaimed him king over the remaining tribes of Israel, establishing his capital in Mahanaim. This act ignited a protracted period of civil war, pitting the house of Saul against the house of David. The conflict, though ultimately destined to favor David, was a bitter and bloody struggle. In 2 Samuel 3:1, the narrative succinctly summarizes this period. There was a long war between the house of Saul and the house of David, and David grew stronger and stronger, while the house of Saul grew weaker and weaker. This verse, however, belies the tragic complexities and personal betrayals that marked this internal strife. One of the most significant events during this period was the defection and subsequent assassination of Abner. After a dispute with Ishbosheth, Abner decided to switch his allegiance to David, promising to bring all Israel under David's rule. David welcomed Abner, made a covenant with him, and sent him away in peace. However, Joab, David's fiercely loyal but often ruthless military commander, viewed Abner as a dangerous rival and a threat to his own position. Moreover, Abner had previously killed Joab's brother, Asahel, in battle. Driven by a desire for revenge and a calculated political maneuver, Joab ambushed Abner and assassinated him. David's reaction to this act was one of profound distress and condemnation. In 2 Samuel 3:28-29, David publicly declared his innocence and pronounced a curse upon Joab and his house. "I and my kingdom are forever innocent before the Lord concerning the blood of Abner the son of Ner. May the guilt fall upon the head of Joab and upon all his father's house, and may the house of Joab never be without one who has a discharge, or who is leprous, or who holds a spindle, or who falls by the sword, or who lacks bread." This powerful statement demonstrated David's unwavering commitment to justice and his refusal to condone such treacherous violence, even when perpetrated by his own trusted commander. The civil war finally reached its conclusion with the assassination of Ishbosheth. Two of his own captains, Rechab and Baanah, hoping to gain favor and reward from David, murdered Ishbosheth in his bed and brought his head to David in Hebron. Once again, David's response defied their expectations. In 2 Samuel 4:9-12, David condemned their wicked act, reminding them of his judgment upon the Amalekite who claimed to have killed Saul. He declared, "How much more, when wicked men have killed a righteous man in his own house on his bed, shall I not now require his blood from your hand and destroy you from the earth?" David ordered their execution, their hands and feet cut off, and their bodies hung by the pool in Hebron as a public display of justice. Ishbosheth's head was honorably buried in Abner's tomb in Hebron. With Ishbosheth's death, the last obstacle to David's full kingship was removed. The way was now clear for him to unite all the tribes of Israel under his rule, fulfilling the divine promise that had guided his life since his youth. The stage was set for a new era, a golden age for Israel, but the challenges of building a unified nation and establishing a spiritual center were immense, and the path ahead would demand both wisdom and unwavering faith. Building a kingdom, Jerusalem and the Ark. With the last vestiges of Saul's house removed, the path was finally clear for David to assume the full mantle of kingship over all Israel. The long, arduous journey from a humble shepherd to a hunted fugitive and then to a regional king had culminated in this pivotal moment. In 2 Samuel 5:1-3, the narrative beautifully captures the unification of the kingdom. Then all the tribes of Israel came to David at Hebron and said, "Behold, we are your bone and flesh. In times past, when Saul was king over us, it was you who led out and brought in Israel. And the Lord said to you, You shall be shepherd of my people Israel, and you shall be prince over Israel." All the elders of Israel came to King David at Hebron, and there before the Lord they made a covenant with him and anointed David king over all Israel. This anointing at Hebron was not merely a political ceremony, it was the sacred culmination of God's promise, a divine affirmation of David's destiny. The shepherd of sheep, the court musician, the fugitive warrior, now stood as the undisputed sovereign of a unified nation. David's reign over Judah had lasted 7 years and 6 months, and now, at the age of 30, he began his reign over all Israel and Judah, which would span 33 years from Jerusalem. One of David's first and most strategically brilliant actions as king of unified Israel was the conquest of Jerusalem. The city, then known as Jebus, was held by the Jebusites, a formidable people who believed their fortress was impregnable. In 2 Samuel 5:6-7, their defiant taunt echoes through time. "You will not come in here, but the blind and the lame will ward you off," thinking, David cannot come in here. Nevertheless, David, with his seasoned warriors, captured the stronghold of Zion, which he then renamed the City of David. This conquest was not just a military triumph, it was a stroke of political genius. Strategically located on the border between the northern and southern tribes, Jerusalem served as a neutral ground, a unifying point that transcended tribal loyalties. Moreover, because it had not been previously associated with any specific tribe, it could truly become a national capital, a symbol of unity for all Israel. With Jerusalem established as his capital, David turned his attention to securing the borders of his newly unified kingdom. The Philistines, ever a thorn in Israel's side, soon launched an attack, hoping to crush the nascent kingdom before it could fully consolidate its power. In 2 Samuel 5:17-21, we witness David's characteristic reliance on divine guidance. When the Philistines heard that David had been anointed king over Israel, all the Philistines went up to search for David. But David heard of it and went down to the stronghold. David, instead of rushing into battle, inquired of the Lord, "Shall I go up against the Philistines? Will you give them into my hand?" The Lord's response was clear, "Go up, for I will certainly give the Philistines into your hand." David, trusting in the divine promise, attacked them at Baal-perazim and decisively defeated them. He declared, The Lord has broken through my enemies before me like a breakthrough of waters. Did the Philistines, in their hasty retreat, abandon their idols, which David and his men carried off, symbolizing the supremacy of the God of Israel over the pagan deities of their adversaries? This victory was not just military, it was a powerful spiritual statement, affirming the Lord's protection over his anointed king and his chosen people. With the nation unified, the capital established, and external threats repelled, David's heart turned towards a matter of profound spiritual significance, bringing the Ark of the Covenant to Jerusalem. The Ark, the sacred chest containing the tablets of the law, represented the very presence of God among his people. For many years, it had been absent from the center of national life, residing in the house of Abinadab in Kiriath Jearim. David understood that for Jerusalem to truly be the spiritual heart of Israel, the Ark of the Covenant must reside there. The first attempt to transport the Ark, however, ended in tragedy, a stark reminder of the holiness of God and the necessity of adhering to his divine instructions. In 2 Samuel 6:6-7, we read that as the ark was being transported on a new cart drawn by oxen, the animals stumbled. Uzzah, one of Abinadab's sons, reached out to steady the ark, an act born perhaps of good intention, but in direct violation of God's command that only Levites, specifically the Kohathites, were to carry the ark on poles, never touching it directly. The Lord's anger flared against Uzzah for his irreverent act, and he struck him down, and Uzzah died there beside the ark. This devastating incident brought a halt to the procession and filled David with both fear and frustration. He realized the immense gravity of handling sacred things and the importance of obedience to divine law. After a period of 3 months, during which the ark remained in the house of Obed-Edom the Gittite, bringing blessings to his household, David, having learned a profound lesson, made a second, meticulously planned attempt to bring the ark to Jerusalem. This time, he ensured that every detail adhered strictly to God's instructions. The ark was carried by the Levites on poles, as prescribed by the law. The procession was marked by immense joy and fervent celebration. In 2 Samuel 6:14-15, the scene is vividly described. And David danced before the Lord with all his might. And David was wearing a linen ephod. So David and all the house of Israel brought up the ark of the Lord with shouting and with the sound of the horn. David's dance was an act of pure, uninhibited worship, a king humbling himself before his God, expressing his boundless joy and devotion. However, not everyone shared in this unbridled expression of worship. Michal, Saul's daughter and David's wife, observed her husband's fervent dancing from a window and despised him in her heart. She viewed his actions as undignified, unbecoming of a king. Her scornful words, recorded in 2 Samuel 6:20, revealed her disdain. How the king of Israel honored himself today, uncovering himself today before the eyes of his servants' female servants, as one of the worthless fellows shamelessly uncovers himself. David's response to Michal, however, revealed the true depth of his heart and his understanding of his kingship. It was before the Lord, who chose me in preference to your father and all his house, to appoint me as prince over the people of the Lord over Israel, and I will celebrate before the Lord. I will make myself even more undignified than this, and I will be abased in your eyes. But by the female servants of whom you have spoken, by them I shall be held in honor. 2 Samuel 6:21-22. David understood that his authority came from God, and his ultimate allegiance was to him, not to human expectations of royal decorum. With the Ark of the Covenant finally established in Jerusalem, the city was now not only the political capital, but also the spiritual heart of Israel. David's reign had reached a new zenith, marked by unity, military success, and a renewed commitment to divine worship. But even at the pinnacle of his power, A profound desire stirred within David's heart, a yearning to build a permanent dwelling for the Almighty, a desire that would lead to an even greater, eternal promise from God Himself, a promise that would shape the destiny of Israel for generations to come, and point towards a future hope far grander than any earthly temple. The king's great fall and profound repentance, with the Ark of the Covenant securely enshrined in Jerusalem, and the nation enjoying a period of unprecedented peace and prosperity, David's heart turned towards a grander vision. He resided in a magnificent palace of cedar, a testament to his power and the stability of his reign, while the Ark of God, the very symbol of the divine presence, still dwelled within a tent. This disparity stirred a deep desire within David to build a permanent, glorious temple for the Lord. He expressed this noble aspiration to the prophet Nathan, who initially encouraged him, believing it to be a righteous endeavor. However, that very night the Lord spoke to Nathan, revealing a different plan. In 2 Samuel 7:5-7, God's message to David, delivered through Nathan, was clear. "Go and tell my servant David, 'Thus says the Lord, would you build me a house to dwell in? I have not lived in a house since the day I brought up the people of Israel from Egypt to this day, but I have been moving about in a tent for my dwelling. In all my moving about among all the people of Israel, did I ever speak a word to any of the judges of Israel, whom I commanded to shepherd my people Israel, saying, Why have you not built me a house of cedar?' God, in His infinite wisdom, clarified that it would not be David, a man of war, who would build his house, but his son, a man of peace. Yet even as God denied David's immediate request, He bestowed upon him an extraordinary and eternal promise, a covenant that would forever alter the trajectory of Israel's history and point towards a future messianic hope. In 2 Samuel 7:11-16, the Lord declared, "The Lord will make you a house. When your days are fulfilled and you lie down with your fathers, I will raise up your offspring after you, who shall come from your body, and I will establish his kingdom. He shall build a house for my name, and I will establish the throne of his kingdom forever. I will be to him a father, and he shall be to me a son. When he commits iniquity, I will punish him with the rod of men, with the stripes of the sons of men. But my steadfast love will not depart from him, as I took it from Saul, whom I put away from before you. And your house and your kingdom shall be made sure forever before me. Your throne shall be established forever." Thus, this Davidic covenant was a promise of an everlasting dynasty, a lineage that would ultimately culminate in the person of Jesus Christ, the Son of David, whose kingdom would indeed be eternal. David's response to this magnificent promise was a beautiful prayer of humble gratitude and awe, recorded in 2 Samuel 7:18-19, where he expressed his unworthiness and wonder at God's boundless grace. But even at the zenith of his reign, basking in divine favor and the glory of his kingdom, David, a man of profound faith, was still a man, susceptible to the frailties and temptations of human nature. His greatest triumph would be followed by his most devastating failure, a sin that would cast a long, dark shadow over his reign and bring immense suffering to his household. The story begins in 2 Samuel 11:1-2. In the spring of the year, the time when kings go out to battle, David sent Joab and his servants with him, and all Israel, and they ravaged the Ammonites and besieged Rabbah, but David remained at Jerusalem. While his army was engaged in the perils of war, David, perhaps complacent in his power, remained in the comfort of his palace. One evening from his rooftop, he saw a woman bathing, a sight that ignited a forbidden desire within him. This woman was Bathsheba, the wife of Uriah the Hittite, one of David's most loyal and elite soldiers, a man who was, at that very moment, risking his life on the battlefield for his king. Instead of turning away, David succumbed to his lust. He sent for Bathsheba and committed adultery with her. When Bathsheba later informed him that she was pregnant, David, desperate to conceal his sin and protect his reputation, embarked on a treacherous path of deception. His first attempt was to summon Uriah from the battlefield, hoping that Uriah would return home, sleep with his wife, and thus believe the child was his own. But Uriah, a man of unwavering integrity and loyalty, refused to enjoy the comforts of home while his comrades were enduring the hardships of war. In 2 Samuel 11:11, Uriah's noble words stand as a stark rebuke to David's moral compromise. The ark and Israel and Judah dwell in booths, and my lord Joab and the servants of my lord are encamped in the open field. Shall I then go to my house, to eat and to drink and to lie with my wife? As you live and as your soul lives, I will not do this thing. Seeing his initial plan thwarted by Uriah's unblemished character, David descended into an even darker abyss of sin. He sent Uriah back to the front lines of the fiercest fighting, carrying his own death warrant in a sealed letter to Joab. The instruction was chillingly clear. Place Uriah in the thickest part of the battle, and then withdraw, leaving him to die. Joab, ever loyal to his king, executed the heinous command. After Uriah's death, David took Bathsheba as his wife, believing his secret was safe, his sin buried beneath layers of deception and murder. But nothing, absolutely nothing, escapes the all-seeing eye of the Almighty. The Lord, in his perfect justice, sent the prophet Nathan to confront David. Nathan, with divine wisdom, approached the king not with direct accusation, but with a poignant parable about a rich man who, despite owning vast flocks, heartlessly stole and slaughtered the only beloved lamb of a poor man. David, his sense of justice inflamed, declared that the rich man deserved to die. It was then that Nathan, with a thunderous pronouncement that pierced David's soul, uttered the unforgettable words, "You are the man." 2 Samuel 12:7. Nathan's confrontation, delivered with divine authority, shattered David's complacency and led him to a place of profound brokenness and genuine repentance. In 2 Samuel 12:13, David, stripped bare of his defenses, confessed, "I have sinned against the Lord." Although God, in his boundless mercy, forgave David's sin, the consequences were severe and far-reaching. Nathan prophesied that the sword would never depart from David's house, and that the child born of his illicit union with Bathsheba would surely die. Indeed, the infant became gravely ill, and despite David's fervent prayers and fasting, the child died after 7 days. David's reaction to this devastating loss was remarkable and revealed the depth of his faith. While the child was alive, he fasted and wept, pleading with God. But upon the child's death he arose, washed himself, anointed himself, changed his clothes, and went into the house of the Lord to worship. When questioned by his servants about this seemingly contradictory behavior, David explained in 2 Samuel 12:23, "While the child was still alive, I fasted and wept, for I said, 'Who knows whether the Lord will be gracious to me, that the child may live?' But now he is dead. Why should I fast? Can I bring him back again? I shall go to him, but he will not return to me." This demonstrated his acceptance of God's sovereign will and his unwavering trust in divine wisdom, even in the face of immense personal sorrow. However, the bitter fruits of David's sin continued to ripen, bringing a cascade of tragedies and conflicts within his own family, fulfilling Nathan's prophecy that the sword would never depart from his house. The once unified kingdom, built on faith and divine promise, would now be rocked by internal strife, rebellion, and heartbreak, testing David's leadership and his spirit in ways even more profound than the years of Saul's persecution. A legacy etched in eternity, the king's final acts and enduring hope. The consequences of David's sin with Bathsheba and the murder of Uriah cast a long, dark shadow over his reign, fulfilling Nathan's prophecy that the sword would never depart from his house. The once harmonious royal family became a crucible of strife, betrayal, and heartbreak. One of the most painful predictions came to pass with the rape of Tamar, David's daughter, by her half-brother Amnon. This heinous act ignited a cycle of revenge that culminated in Absalom, Tamar's full brother, murdering Amnon. Absalom then fled, only to return years later, his heart festering with ambition and resentment. Absalom's rebellion was a devastating blow to David, forcing him to flee Jerusalem in a scene that eerily echoed his earlier flight from Saul. In 2 Samuel 15:30, a poignant image is painted. But David went up the ascent of the Mount of Olives, weeping as he went, barefoot and with his head covered. And all the people who were with him covered their heads, and they went up, weeping as they went. During this humiliating flight, David faced insults and curses, notably from Shimei, a man from Saul's family, who hurled stones and dust at him, accusing him of being a man of blood. Yet David, humbled by his past sins and trusting in God's sovereignty, responded with remarkable restraint and humility. "Let him alone, and let him curse, for the Lord has told him to. It may be that the Lord will look on my distress and repay me with good for his cursing today." 2 Samuel 16:11-12. This demonstrated a profound shift in David's character, a deeper reliance on divine justice rather than personal vengeance. Absalom's rebellion, though initially successful, ultimately ended in tragedy. Despite David's explicit command to his generals to deal gently for my sake with the young man Absalom, Joab, David's ruthless commander, disregarded the order and killed Absalom. David's lament for his rebellious son is one of the most heart-wrenching passages in all of Scripture. In 2 Samuel 18:33, his cries of anguish echo through time. "O my son Absalom, my son Absalom, would that I had died instead of you, O Absalom, my son, my son." This profound grief, even for a son who had sought to usurp his throne and take his life, revealed the depth of David's paternal love and his enduring humanity. Despite these personal tragedies and family conflicts, David's reign continued to be marked by military victories and a general prosperity for Israel. However, near the end of his reign, David committed another significant error. He ordered a census of the people, an act that was unauthorized by God and driven by pride or a desire to rely on human strength rather than divine provision. In 2 Samuel 24:10, David's conscience smote him immediately after the census. David's heart struck him after he had numbered the people, and David said to the Lord, "I have sinned greatly in what I have done. But now, O Lord, please take away the iniquity of your servant, for I have acted very foolishly." This census resulted in a devastating plague that claimed the lives of 70,000 Israelites. The plague was only halted when David, in humble repentance, built an altar and offered sacrifices at the threshing floor of Araunah the Jebusite, a site that would later become the location of the glorious temple built by his son Solomon. David's reign, with its glorious triumphs and its profound failures, serves as a powerful and complex reminder of the human condition and the constant need for divine grace. Despite his grave sins, David maintained a heart that, at its core, was turned towards God, always seeking repentance, forgiveness, and restoration when he stumbled. It is for this reason that despite his flaws, David is remembered as a man after God's own heart, because ultimately his heart was always directed towards the Almighty, acknowledging his dependence and seeking his will. In the twilight years of his life, David turned his attention to a project that had long resided in his heart, the construction of a magnificent temple for the Lord. Although God had revealed that it would be his son, Solomon, and not David himself, who would build the physical edifice, David dedicated himself with fervent zeal to making extensive preparations for this monumental undertaking. In 1 Chronicles 22:5, David articulates his vision. "Solomon my son is young and inexperienced, and the house that is to be built for the Lord must be exceedingly magnificent, of fame and glory throughout all lands. Therefore, I will make preparation for him." And so, David poured his energy and resources into gathering vast quantities of materials: gold, silver, bronze, iron, timber, and stone, ensuring that the future temple would be a structure of unparalleled splendor. Beyond the material provisions, David meticulously organized the Levites and priests for their service in the future temple. He established divisions for the priests, assigned roles for the musicians and singers, and designated gatekeepers, ensuring that the worship of God would be conducted with reverence, order, and beauty for generations to come. These comprehensive preparations underscore David's profound devotion and his unwavering commitment to establishing a lasting legacy of worship for his people. As David's physical strength waned, the critical question of succession to the throne became pressing. Although God had already chosen Solomon to succeed him, an attempted usurpation by Adonijah, another of David's sons, created a brief but intense crisis. This succession struggle, detailed in 1 Kings 1, threatened to plunge the kingdom into chaos. In response to this challenge, David, with the wisdom and authority of a seasoned monarch, acted decisively to ensure Solomon's rightful ascent. He commanded the priest Zadok, the prophet Nathan, and Benaiah the son of Jehoiada to anoint Solomon as king, riding on David's own mule, and to proclaim him king with the sound of the trumpet. With Solomon firmly established as his successor, David delivered his final, profound instructions both to his son and to the assembled people of Israel. In 1 Kings 2:4, he imparted timeless counsel to Solomon. "I am about to go the way of all the earth. Be strong, therefore, and show yourself a man, and keep the charge of the Lord your God, walking in his ways and keeping his statutes, his commandments, his rules, and his testimonies, as it is written in the law of Moses, that you may prosper in all that you do and wherever you turn, that the Lord may establish his word that he spoke concerning me, saying, if your sons pay close attention to their way, to walk before me in faithfulness with all their heart and with all their soul, you shall not lack a man on the throne of Israel." This was a charge to walk in integrity, obedience, and unwavering faithfulness to the divine covenant. In his last recorded words to the entire assembly of Israel, David offered a magnificent prayer of praise and thanksgiving, a testament to his lifelong devotion. In 1 Chronicles 29:10-13, his voice, though perhaps weakened by age, resonated with the power of a heart fully surrendered to God. "Blessed are you, O Lord, the God of Israel, our Father, forever and ever. Yours, O Lord, is the greatness, and the power, and the glory, and the victory, and the majesty, for all that is in the heavens and in the earth is yours. Yours is the kingdom, O Lord, and you are exalted as head above all. Both riches and honor come from you, and you rule over all. In your hand are power and might, and in your hand it is to make great and to give strength to all. Now therefore, our God, we thank you and praise your glorious name." After a life filled with extraordinary highs and devastating lows, with triumphant victories and painful failures, David finally rested. In 1 Kings 2:10-11, the narrative concludes, "Then David slept with his fathers and was buried in the city of David, and the time that David reigned over Israel was 40 years. He reigned 7 years in Hebron and 33 years in Jerusalem." David's legacy, however, transcended the boundaries of his earthly life and reign, extending far beyond his death to shape the very identity and faith of Israel for millennia. His impact is immeasurable and multifaceted. Firstly, David is remembered as the quintessential ideal king in Israel. Even centuries after his passing, subsequent monarchs were often measured against his standard. A king, like David, became synonymous with a just, righteous, and God-fearing ruler. His reign was the golden age, the benchmark against which all others were judged. Secondly, David bequeathed a profound and enduring literary legacy in the form of the Psalms. Many of these poetic expressions of the soul are attributed to him, and they continue to serve as an inexhaustible wellspring of comfort, inspiration, and guidance for the faithful across generations. David's Psalms articulate the full spectrum of human experience, from the heights of joyous praise to the depths of sorrowful lament, from unwavering trust to moments of despair, always framed within the context of an unshakable faith in God. They are a mirror reflecting the human heart in its dynamic relationship with the divine. Thirdly, and perhaps most significantly, David became central to Israel's messianic expectations. God's promise to David of an eternal dynasty, the Davidic covenant, ignited the fervent hope of a future son of David who would establish an everlasting kingdom, a reign of perfect justice and peace. This profound hope found its ultimate and glorious fulfillment in the person of Jesus Christ. The New Testament, in Matthew 1:1, begins with these foundational words: the book of the genealogy of Jesus Christ, the son of David, the son of Abraham. Jesus is frequently referred to as the son of David in the Gospels, and his Davidic lineage is understood as the direct fulfillment of these ancient messianic prophecies, connecting the earthly king to the heavenly king. David's life, in all its intricate complexity, offers us invaluable lessons that transcend his specific time and cultural context. His story teaches us about the absolute sovereignty of God in history. The Almighty chose David, the youngest and seemingly least significant son of Jesse, to become Israel's greatest king, reminding us that God often works through the unlikely, the underestimated, and the overlooked to accomplish his magnificent purposes. David's life also powerfully illustrates the paramount importance of faith and unwavering trust in God, from his audacious confrontation with the giant Goliath to his arduous years as a hunted fugitive, and throughout his glorious yet challenging reign as king. David consistently demonstrated an unshakable reliance on the Almighty, even in the face of seemingly impossible circumstances. His faith was not theoretical, it was a living, breathing force that propelled him forward. At the same time, David's narrative unflinchingly reveals the stark reality of sin and its devastating consequences, even in the lives of the most revered heroes of faith. His adultery with Bathsheba and the calculated murder of Uriah brought about a cascade of suffering and sorrow that deeply impacted his family and his kingdom. However, David's response when confronted with his sin, genuine, heartfelt repentance and a humble acceptance of God's just judgment, provides us with a profound model for how we too should confront and deal with our own failures and moral shortcomings. Furthermore, David's life teaches us about the transformative power of forgiveness and restoration. Despite his grave transgressions, David experienced God's boundless forgiveness and was ultimately restored to a deep and intimate fellowship with him. This offers us immense hope, reminding us that no matter how far we may have fallen, forgiveness and restoration are always available to those who turn to God with sincere repentance and a contrite heart. Finally, David's story reminds us that true greatness in God's eyes is not measured by human perfection or an absence of flaws, but by a heart that continually seeks God, that yearns for his presence, and that strives to align itself with his will. Despite his many imperfections, David is remembered as a man after God's own heart, because ultimately his heart was always directed towards the Almighty, acknowledging his dependence and seeking his guidance in all things. In conclusion, the life of David is a rich, complex, and utterly captivating tapestry that continues to ignite our imagination and stir our hearts, thousands of years after his earthly journey concluded. His extraordinary path from a humble shepherd boy to the mighty throne of Israel, His moments of breathtaking triumph and his devastating defeats, his unwavering faith and his profound human failures, all combine to paint a vivid portrait of a life lived in dynamic, often turbulent, yet ultimately devoted relationship with God. David's enduring legacy as a warrior king, a gifted poet, a passionate worshipper, and a man of profound faith continues to shape our understanding of leadership, the essence of true worship, and what it truly means to live a life dedicated to the Most High. His story stands as an eternal testament that God can, and often does, use imperfect people to accomplish His perfect and magnificent purposes. It reminds us that true greatness lies not in the absence of flaws, but in the continual willingness to turn to God in all circumstances of life, to seek His grace, to respond to His correction, and to dedicate our very beings to His service. If David's incredible journey, with all its triumphs and trials, has resonated with your spirit and ignited a spark of faith within you, then we invite you to join our growing community. Please consider subscribing to our channel for more compelling biblical narratives that illuminate the timeless truths of ancient wisdom. Share this video with anyone who needs to hear this powerful message of hope, resilience, and divine purpose. And most importantly, tell us in the comments below what part of David's story speaks most powerfully to your own journey. Your insights enrich our collective understanding, and we eagerly await your reflections.